welcome to our weekly webinar. We're so glad you joined us today. My name is Jesse Smith. I'm the Operations Director for Patent Logistics, sort of an operations consultant for Route Consultant. You may have seen me on a webinar before, maybe on a YouTube video. Really glad to be here. I love hosting these. We got a really special co-host for you today that I'm going to bring on here in a second. So if you're new with us, welcome. We love having new faces here. We want this webinar to be really informative, but more than that, we try to always make it fun. So you're going to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to learn about FedEx Ground primarily, routes and runs, and we're going to have a topic today that a lot of people really seem to be interested in, which I'll get to in a second. But before we go any further, I've got to do the one not fun thing of the week, which is read the disclaimer. Route Consultant is not endorsed by, it is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Okay, if you've been here before with us, this is not going to come as a surprise to you, but we do have a weekly tradition, okay? In order to ask a question, and we do very much encourage questions, if you have a question, you have to answer a question of ours first. So be thinking about this one. This will be a fun one. Today, we're going to be asking, what is your favorite board game? So I have a feeling some of you are going to be dating yourselves pretty good with this one if you go, pretty far back with some of these. But what is your favorite board game? Be thinking about that. Make sure if you ask us a question, you answer that question along with your question. If you're going to give us a question, make sure you use the Q&A button at the bottom. If you use the chat, we may not see it. We usually use the chat for things like we'll give you links, email addresses, contact info, things like that. So make sure you use that Q&A button at the bottom. Okay, real quick, the one event I've got to tell you guys about, it's our big one, okay? It's our expo. If you've not RSVP'd yet, do that now. This one, the last one was huge. We hope this year is even bigger. Okay, this is going to be July 29th and 30th is our annual expo in Las Vegas at the Paris Hotel. We really hope to see you there. If you want to go, you're going to go to routeconsultant.com/events to RSVP. Okay, before we get to our content portion today, let me get through a few listings. Okay, we've got 6 new listings for you guys. And there's going to be a few that if you didn't hear a listing of yours read in the last couple of weeks, we kind of accidentally skipped over a couple, so I apologize for that. So I'm going to try to get caught up on everything here and get you guys current on what we've got listed on our site. So our 6 newest ones are going to be number 1, our P&D routes in North Florida. So we've got a 7-route operation valued at $250,000, 31.8% of revenue, and that's a 16.3% EBITDA margin. It comes with 1 manager. Low entry price, that is a decent price from what I've seen into the ground network. There are no trucks included on this one, so be aware you're going to have to source your own fleet if you want this one. All right, it's a rural territory averaging 180 daily miles per route. The rural routes do offer improved profitability, higher per stop charges, and lower than average turnover. The territory is located in close proximity to military bases and tourist areas. The business operates under a 6-day work week, so that's always where we're kind of looking at that as a plus, right? You get that 1 day off, can really be a good time to recharge. The CSA resides in a beautiful beachfront location, so this could be a really potentially lucrative one. If you want this, snap this one up. I know our Florida ones always tend to go pretty quick. Central Ohio is the next one. This is a 16 P&D route operation valued at $1,050,000. 68.6% of revenue. It's a 15.2% EBITDA margin. This one also comes with 1 manager with 4 years of experience, 1 spare truck. The business services a territory which is experiencing constant residential and commercial development, so high growth area. It has an improved fleet included in the sale. All vehicles are 2017 model years and newer. A great roster of drivers, many of which are veterans in the crew, and they've been with the business for multiple years. And also there's low daily miles, which reduces drive time and wear and tear on your trucks. So a good one there in Central Ohio. The next one's going to be in Kansas. We've got a 15 P&D route operation at $1.45 million. This one's at 77% of revenue, 17.3% EBITDA margin. 1 manager employed since 2016. So that's a really good track record for that manager. 5 spare trucks are included with this. The business averages 171 daily miles per route, but services local high density areas within the territory. So a lot of stem miles to get to the routes, but a lot of density once you get there. A loyal employee roster. Most employees have been with the company for multiple years and may be eligible for SBA financing. So that's always a plus there. If you're looking at Kansas, this is one to get your hands on. North Central Maryland, this is our last P&D listing. We've got an 8 P&D route operation valued at $1.299 million, and that's at 100.49% of revenue. The EBITDA margin on this one is 25.7%, comes with 2 managers, 6 spare trucks, excellent operation that exhibits higher than average profit margins, well-run operation. It's set up for good success. The territory is in a safe, is safe and located in an affluent area with little traffic. The operation is under scale, which allows for additional growth opportunities, and then valuable vehicle maintenance relationships keep the cost down. So they got good vendor relationships built in there as well. So those are our P&D opportunities. On the line haul side, we have got 2 for you today. The first one, it's Eastern Pennsylvania. It's 7 runs valued at $1.6 million, and that's 54.34% of revenue. 11% EBITDA margin, 7 unassigned team runs. Unassigned runs provide opportunity to accumulate points. If you know anything about the point system, this is a really great opportunity to do that and to build up those points. Great fleet included, all 2018 model year tractors or newer. And then 2 extra drivers come with this operation, which helps promote efficiency and productivity. So good one there in Eastern Pennsylvania. And then the final one, excuse me, final one is in Central Florida. It's a 3-run operation at $650,000 or 103% of revenue. This one's at a 21.9% EBITDA margin, 1 dedicated solo and 2 unassigned solo runs with 1 spare tractor. Okay, this is a smaller operation, makes for a great starter business if you're a new contractor trying to get into the space without getting sort of overwhelmed. This would be a good one to start with. It is located in a desirable beachfront state. Obviously, a lot of Florida ones we see, those are always highly desired. The nature of line haul operations is conducive to remote ownership. So if you're wanting to be remote, line haul allows you to do that with a little bit more facility than you would on a P&D operation. And of course, dedicated runs, these offer guaranteed revenue for you, while unassigned runs offer the opportunity to, again, accumulate those points. Okay, deep breath. Those are our listings, our new ones for this week. So let's go ahead and get into our content today. So today we're going to be talking all about why are there so many routes for sale and sort of some of the factors that impact sale timelines, evaluation, things like that. For that, we're going to bring on our resident expert here at Route Consultant, Leah Nelson. Leah is our Director of Compliance and Production here. She's got years of experience, has seen thousands of listings. She's going to be able to talk to you guys about this process. Why are there so many routes and runs out there for sale and what goes into that? So Leah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. So we've got a fun topic today. We're going to be covering a handful of things. So we'll be talking about why there are so many FedEx operations on the market, the reasons contractors sell their businesses, how those reasons that they're selling impact the timeline of the sale, and how the timelines can impact the valuation. So quite a few things rolled into today. So to start, it may seem like there are a ton of FedEx businesses on the market right now and a lot of contractors selling their businesses. While that may seem like the case, there are around 500 to 550 businesses on the market right now out of several thousand contractors. So not even 10% of operations are on the market, which is a relatively small percentage of the entire network. So, you know, it's 50% of people aren't trying to get out or anything like that. It's a relatively small percentage of the network. So, and it is normal to see cycles of more businesses on the market than normal, depending on things like the health of the network, the economy, and the availability of financing. So no reason to be concerned about the number of businesses on the market right now. In fact, there are just more options available. But there are a ton of reasons why contractors sell their businesses. There are a few that we see more often than others. One of the big ones that we see pretty often is retiring. That's a really common one. A contractor has been in the FedEx space for a long time. They want to sell their business, retire, spend time with their families, take it easy. We do see that one a lot. Sometimes they want to do a slow retirement plan. They want to downsize, sell a couple of routes, half their business, start that retirement transition, and sell off a couple pieces over the course of a couple of years. Regular downsizing, not to retire, but just to downsize to raise capital is also really common. So selling to raise capital to reinvest into the FedEx business itself, or into other business ventures to broaden the business portfolio. We see that one quite often. Or we also see, say P&D or line haul contractors that want to sell off a chunk of their P&D or line haul business to invest in the other one. So we've got P&D contractors who want to sell a handful of routes so they can get into line haul or the other way around. So those are some really common things that we see when it comes to selling. So another thing too is similar to kind of real estate flipping. Sometimes experienced contractors will purchase or acquire kind of poorly performing routes at a discount. They'll invest into the fleet, the staffing, put some sweat equity into it, and then sell the higher performing business for a higher price than they paid. So that's certainly a strategy that people do as well, and a reason why they'll sell their business. If a contractor is selling really for any of those reasons that I talked about above, there's really no time constraints or external pressures on those types of sales in most cases. There is time to wait for the perfect buyer and find that person who is going to be a really good fit for the business. Businesses with kind of these reasons for the sale, so downsizing or retiring, they may be priced higher than other businesses because there aren't those time constraints or external pressures. In most cases, the seller's primary goal is to raise capital so they don't have to sell quickly, and it makes sense to place a higher price tag on those businesses and wait for a buyer that's willing to pay that higher price tag. There are other reasons that contractors sell that do warrant kind of a faster timeline, a more expedited process. So if there's pressure from the terminal, there could be hard deadlines to sell the business, like, hey, you have till the end of June to do this. That's something that we see right now, and kind of always, a little bit less right now than normal, but sometimes contractors get too big in their terminal. They've surpassed the scale limits that are in place in their terminal, and they're required to sell a piece of their business in order to stay within scale. That's certainly a reason that we see often for the kind of the downsizing piece, is that they're being told they have to do that by the terminal in order to keep their businesses. Those don't always necessarily have super strict timelines, as opposed to if you had like a safety or service violation. If you're just too big, they're a little looser on that, but still timelines in place for that. If a business has received an OTC, which is an opportunity to cure, they're given a specific amount of time to sell their business before it's taken away from FedEx. So those are generally the sales that have the most urgency on them. And because of this, the purchase prices for businesses with OTCs or pressure from the terminal in any type of way, they have lower prices to find buyers at the fastest pace. So that being said, purchasing a business that has an OTC is not necessarily inherently a bad thing or something to be overly concerned about. It can actually be a really good business investment. There are a few additional factors you have to be prepared for if you're buying a business with an OTC or that has poor performance. One of the most important, like I alluded to above, is the expedited timeline, of course. As a buyer, you'll need to be able and willing to move really quickly to achieve the goals that the seller has in place. If you're using financing, this can be a little bit tricky with an OTC, but if that is a path you're going down and the seller's okay with that, you need to make sure that you've got all of your documents in place for the bank. You don't want to hit any delays because you haven't filed your tax returns yet, or you can't get your tax returns from 2019 from your accountant. So making sure that you've got all of those things in place as soon as you're physically able to do that is really important. You may also need to be prepared to inject additional capital into the business, into the fleet, perhaps, if that's one of the issues that's happening. And you'll most certainly need to be prepared to invest, like I said before, kind of some sweat equity to turn the business around. So buying a business with an OTC or that's performing poorly is going to require a little bit more effort than if you were buying a perfectly functioning business. But if you're willing to do any of those things, the upside of purchasing a business with an OTC or operational issues can be really great. As I mentioned before, they can be treated kind of like a house flip, a real estate flip. You buy low, you invest, and you sell high. So another option there too is you can fix the business and retain it for cash flow. For the next couple of years, you fix it and it's got great cash flow and you keep it and you hold on to it. So again, not necessarily a bad thing if the business has an OTC. You just have to know mentally what you're getting into before you do it. So there are a few other factors that can influence really the price of a business. So first and foremost, and I would say are always the most important, is the net income of the business. If the net income is high, the business can support a higher purchase price than if the net income was low, that'd be support a lower purchase price. The fleet is the other really important main factor. Higher quality fleets can warrant higher purchase prices since the buyer won't have to inject any additional capital right on the front end. With both of those, if you are a contractor considering selling your operation at some point, maybe not imminently, but you're thinking about, oh, hey, in the next 1 or 2 years, I might sell my business. You're not under any type of time pressure. Improving your fleet and margins can get you a higher purchase price. So say you're currently running at a 12% margin, find a couple of ways to improve that margin, get it to 15 to 18% over the next couple of years. Maybe you cut some routes or consolidate or change some pay structures, but that can get you a way, way higher price down the line if you're willing to make some of those changes now and you want to sell in the near future. Kind of same with trucks. If you want to invest in the fleet, you can get a higher selling price in most cases. So really, from a contractor's perspective, no matter your reason for selling, you should always have an exit strategy and be familiar with the selling process. So if you do need to sell in an emergency, if you have a health issue or you get an OTC or really just something crazy happens, you already know what it takes to get a deal done and you can be prepared to do that. So the more prepared you are, the less concessions you have to make when it comes time to sell, if you're ready to go. Always have up-to-date information available and ready, financial information, any information about the business, know where your registrations are for your trucks. That's important for the selling process. So things like that, just have those documents always gathered and ready just in case an emergency happens and you do need to sell your business. Because if you come under a tight timeline and you don't have the necessary information available, it can be really challenging to find a qualified buyer in time. So just always make sure that you're ready to go in the event of an emergency. And hopping back to kind of from a buyer perspective, just making sure you understand the contractor's reason for selling their business can provide really valuable insights into the timelines that you're on, any improvements you may need to make to the business and the seller's expectations out of a sale. So it can help you kind of navigate the entire selling process from start to finish if you understand those reasons. If a contractor is selling to raise capital for a new business adventure, they may not accept 60% offer on their asking price. And they may not provide a substantial amount of seller financing because they want their cash now. If a seller is retiring, they may not want to provide, endless months of transition support because they want to take a big vacation with their family or something. And if a seller has, an urgent health issue or an OTC, they may not be willing to wait around for a bank to finance the purchase and would prefer a cash buyer. So, the reason for selling is really important, a really important thing to discuss with your seller when you're starting to look at a business. So everyone involved knows the expectations, like I said, on timeline, on what the business is going to need. So just having those really candid conversations is very important part of your due diligence process.
Yeah, Leah, that's so much great information. Some stuff in there I didn't even know. So I love learning about the brokerage side because it's so much different than the operational kind of in the weeds side that I'm used to. So I love all that. I'm sure we'll get some questions on this. So let's go ahead and transition into this Q&A portion. We got one question right now, but before we get into that, of course, we have to answer the question of the day ourselves. So Leah, what is your favorite board game?
Yes, I'm a categories person. It's really fast paced, it's creative, but it doesn't require too much thought, and you don't have to sit there and play it for like 4 or 5 hours like some games. But definitely categories is my favorite.
I love it. Well, mine is, again, I'm really gonna date myself, although I don't feel as bad with you saying categories, but I grew up playing Battleship and I still love it to this day. Can we count that as a board game since it's got a flat board on it that you play?
Absolutely. I think it's more of a board game than categories. So absolutely.
Yeah. I love me some Battleship. So just, simple, straightforward. I love how that game goes. So, okay, y'all. So get your questions in here. We got one right now, which I'll go ahead and pass over to you, Leah. So easy question for you. I'm interested in buying a route and I've got all the basic information from the seller. Is there any way you can help me evaluate the business and how much I should offer to buy this route?
Yes, absolutely. That's something myself, my team, we do assist with. So we've got plenty of consulting products that's part of it. That's a big part of it is we'll take all that basic information, settlement statements, payroll, truck list, tell you the pros and cons of each of those things and how much you should pay for the business based on those factors.
Yeah, literally one of the reasons we exist is, the buyers, and the sellers, of course, but we got so much to offer on both sides of that equation. So yeah, please reach out to us specifically. I will say this, if you guys have questions that's not just related to what Leah just talked about, if it's anything, if I can answer or if she can answer, we'll be glad to help you. I can talk not so much about this higher level stuff, but I can talk to you about in the weeds type of stuff. So please ask your questions, anything you've got. Okay, we got another one here, Leah. So this person's favorite board game is checkers. Straight up classic there.
Great.
How much is buyer financing outside of the SBA impacting the number of listings?
How much is buyer financing outside of the SBA impacting the number of listings?
Do we need to get some more clarity on that?
I think we might. I don't know that I'm quite following.
Yeah, go ahead and give us a little bit more clarity. Maybe have a specific situation there, anonymous, that you're thinking of. But yeah, kind of give us some color on that. I was actually taking some notes here, Leah. So let me fire a couple at you here that I was thinking of myself. So you mentioned the OTC, you mentioned scale guidelines. Are there any other reasons why a contractor might face pressure from the terminal to sell?
Those are really the primary ones in my experience. Like I said, an OTC can be issued for a couple of different things. If you are having, safety issues or service issues, the OTC can be issued for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And then, of course, scale is always, at this point, minimum scale and also maximum scale are both reasons that people are looking to sell.
Are you able to comment? I know a little bit myself, but are you able to comment on the kind of what the scale trends are right now? I know for a while it was really small. They were trying to make contractors smaller. Now we're seeing that expand. What are we kind of seeing in terms of scale expectations now?
We are. So recently we've seen the scale guidelines. They used to be really tight on how big you could be, and we're seeing that broaden, which is quite exciting in my opinion. So you have a whole lot less partial sales. In most terminals before, it was around, I would say 10% was the scale maximum. Maybe a little 8 to 12% roughly, depending on the terminal. And we're seeing that higher now, which is great. So people are having to chop up their businesses less when they sell it. And so it's easier to get financing on full businesses and things like that, which is kind of my area of expertise. But I don't know exactly what they are in most terminals now, but I've seen some upwards of like 20% you can be. So
yeah, which is crazy to think about. And if you guys are super new to the space, if you don't know what we're talking about by scale guidelines, that's the total percentage of stops that the terminal has. You can only have a certain percentage of that as a single contractor in that building. So let's say if there's 1,000 stops, that's a super low number. But if there's 1,000 stops that the terminal delivers and there's 10 contractors, you would get 100 stops, right? That would be your scale would be 10%. So that's what we mean by that. And the terminal has, they're kind of, again, it depends on the trends. If they're saying, contractors are getting too big, they're presenting too much of a liability to our entire terminal liability profile, so to speak, how many safety incidents, if they have a major service failure that will impact a huge amount of the station's volume that gets delivered or gets backed up, right? It impacts terminal staffing. A lot of different things can go into scale, but that's generally the reason why terminals don't want any single contractor getting too big or even too small, right? They want to have a good, healthy share of what that terminal actually processes. All right, we got a question here from Sonny. I have a feeling there's going to be some different answers to this, but he didn't answer the board game question, but he says, why are sellers taking forever to respond to an offer? Is there an SLA from Route Consultant that requires seller to respond within a certain time frame?
Yes, so there is not a requirement to respond within a certain time frame. That being said, we do encourage our sellers to be respectful of their buyer's time and to get back as soon as possible. There can be a lot of reasons why a seller's taking a long time. Sometimes they have lots of offers coming in and they want to, evaluate their different options. Sometimes they go on vacation and they don't respond for 10 days. There can be a ton of different things. Hopefully it's one of those things where they're just on vacation or something and haven't, are choosing to ignore it on purpose. Again, we don't encourage that with our sellers. We do try to encourage them to respond as quickly as they are able.
Right. Yeah. Daryl Kelly, Risk is his board game. I have a feeling we're not going to just see that one once. That's a real popular one. Who sets the sale price on the listings at Route Consultant? Or maybe you can answer, like, what's that process look like? How do we set the listing price?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our main things here when we're going through the listing process is also we understand the reasons why the seller is selling. Is one of our things that we want to grasp, because that can help us guide the seller in the appropriate direction. Again, if they want to sell quickly, we encourage them to sell a little bit on the lower side. If they are, want to get the most capital, we can encourage them to sell on the higher side. And we've got all that data of the common multiples and common multiples within their state and their region. And with their type of business. So taking those factors, we'll give recommendations on price. So we'll say, hey, if your concern is selling fast, you maybe want to sell at a 3.5 times multiple. But if you want to kind of hold on to it, you're not in any type of rush, maybe sell at a 4.7 times, 4.7 times multiple, or what have you. So we do work with the sellers based on the quality of their business and the, like I said, the NOI and the fleet and a couple other factors, steering them in the correct direction to achieve their goals. In the end, it is the seller's choice what they want to list at. Like I said, but we're here to guide them and help them achieve their goals in the best way we can.
Yeah. So Raj Shah, his board game is Monopoly. His question is, he says, what should the EBITDA margin be for line haul businesses, and what must one look for to help determine if it's a decent business or not from a line haul point of view?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of factors in that. So EBITDA for a line haul business really can kind of depends on the portfolio of runs that you're looking at. I would say it can range anywhere from 15 to 30% is going to be those common ranges. If you're looking at a primarily solo run business, it's going to be on that lower end. I would say 15 to 22, 25%. And if you're looking at team runs, it's going to be on that higher end of things. I would say closer to 20, 25%, maybe even a little bit more than that. So that's kind of the range you're going to look at. Of course, there's always poorly performing businesses that are lower, but those are not the standard. What you want to look at to determine a decent business, of course, NOI. The fleet strategy is really important in line haul as well. So if they've got newer trucks, a lot of people do lease trucks in line haul more so than they do, I would say, in P&D. So just making sure that there's a really solid fleet strategy in place is going to tell you a lot about the health of the business. And then, like I said, kind of alluded to the composition of the run portfolio. So looking to see if it's primarily dedicated runs or if it's unassigned runs. You're going to want to look for a business that's, I would say, mostly dedicated is going to be your best bet. It doesn't hurt to have some unassigned runs in there by any means, but you're not going to want the majority of your portfolio, in most cases, made up of unassigned runs, just because there's a little bit more risk there. And then as well, like I said, if it's solo or team, some of that comes down to preference on what you want to do. But like I said, team runs can be more profitable than solo runs in some cases. So looking at that, and then also looking at the miles of the runs as well. So the longer distances the runs go, whether they're solo or team, or the longer ones are generally going to make more money.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add to that is the recruiting piece of that. It is quite significantly harder to recruit for team runs just because of the nature of the work, right? I mean, you're literally gone for days at a time. And if you don't know that person very well, as you know, Spencer talks about this a lot, is typically you see like husband and wife, father, son, family members, or close friends that are doing these runs together. It's not everybody's doing that, but that's what you see a lot more because you're putting that person's life in your hands and vice versa, right? When you're out there over the road traveling, 7,000 miles a week, you got a lot of exposure to that person. They're about the only person you talk to for the whole week until you get back, right? So recruiting for line haul team runs can be a little bit more challenging. So that's something I would maybe look at as well, as what's the recruiting strategy? What's my recruiting strategy when I get into this business? What's that going to look like? Okay, Charles Hastings, he says Chutes and Ladders is his favorite board game. How much does Leah charge to help review a listing and consulting for the purchaser?
Yeah. So we have a couple of different services, kind of depending on what you want. If you want kind of a one-off situation or a kind of longer term consulting. I don't know all of the prices off the top of my head, if we're being totally honest. I know what we offer, but I don't know how much they cost. But if you go on our website, all that information is there. And like I said, it kind of depends on what you're looking for. We have a couple of different options.
Yeah, absolutely. Anonymous joined late. Do you have a recording of this? Yes. So we get that question. These are all posted on YouTube, usually within 48 hours. So if you just go to our Route Consultant channel on YouTube, you'll be able to find this later on. Okay. We got another one from Anonymous. A lot of people staying anonymous today. His or her favorite board game is chess. If you're already a consulting client, a paid consulting client, but are not seeing opportunities in a given region on the platform, and you source your own opportunity, P&D or line haul, could we still work with our consulting team and have access to the route consulting resources? Great question.
Yes, you can. So if you find an opportunity yourself that you're interested in, absolutely, we are still happy to help and look at that business and tell you the pros and cons of it and give you valuations and things like that. So absolutely.
Yeah. Another anonymous here, another vote from Monopoly. I have a feeling that's probably going to win today. we play house rules, and that helps the game go much faster. So they make their own in-house rules. I love that. The question is, what's your suggestion for contract negotiating in the current economic environment? Spencer used to recommend going with the highest variable. Is that still what we recommend?
It is, yes. Yep, highest variable is still what we recommend.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right, Marty says, he said Scrabble. I think he means Scrabble. So I love that one. Scrabble is one of my favorites as well. Marty says, I'm a prospective buyer leaning towards line haul. I'm used to using EBITDA as a multiple. As in a business, EBITDA is $100,000 per year. Seller is asking 300K. So the multiple would be a 3X. Do you want to kind of break that down a little bit, Leah, what they're talking about EBITDA, just for those who may not just coming in from the beginner level?
Yeah, absolutely. So the EBITDA, that's what is kind of the standard that we use in the market. So that's going to be the net income or the cash flow of the business. It does not include depreciation, interest, amortization, taxes, all those types of things that you'll see on a tax return. So it's got all those non-cash expenses added back into it. It also doesn't include the EBITDA that we use and the banks use and just Route Consult as a whole. It doesn't include any owner compensation or any type of CapEx payments. So if you make payments for vehicles or anything like that, that's going to be what we consider below the line and is not reflected in that EBITDA number. And then kind of going to the multiple is just the EBITDA, cash flow, net income. You'll hear it all kinds of ways. The purchase price divided by that net income is what it is. And so the 3 times, that's correct. That's a correct equation. 3 times multiple is pretty good. So we're seeing multiples right now normally between, I would say, 3.5 and 5 times. Most of the time between 4.5.
Perfect. Okay. We got a buyer here, another anonymous. Purchase of the seller's business does not qualify for SBA funding, and therefore I can't find a lender. So you want to talk maybe a little bit about the current lending environment out there right now, Leah?
Absolutely. Yeah. So lending right now is admittedly a little bit more challenging than it used to be. Interest rates are higher, which definitely impacts the ability to get financing, what businesses can get financing. In most cases, it can be really challenging right now to get financing on carve businesses. So if you're looking at a carve out or a piece of a business, that can make it a little bit more challenging as opposed to a full business. So looking at businesses, I would say that are around 4.5 times multiple or less is really going to be ideal right now. Anything that's priced higher than that is going to be pretty challenging to get with the interest rates. I will say if it doesn't qualify for an SBA loan, which is the most common type of loan that I see that potential buyers get, you can also pursue conventional options. If that's something you're interested in, go talk to maybe the bank that you work with on a regular basis or a local bank and see if they're willing to do it. And then there's creative strategies as well that can involve taking over truck debt, seller financing, a cash combination. There are other options besides the SBA as well.
Perfect. All right, Alexon Esmail, he says, favorite board game is Clue. We briefly mentioned a point system. That's what I talked about earlier, Leah, with the line haul listings that I mentioned. Can we go into further details on how to accumulate points and what are the benefits?
I might let you take this one if you don't mind. You probably know more about it than I do.
Actually, so I'm going to be just completely upfront. My wheelhouse is P&D completely.
Never mind.
I do know it has to do with the amount of runs that you accept or decline. And so obviously the FedEx is going to try to ensure continuity of service. And so I don't want to give you a lot of specifics. I just know it has to do with if you're constantly declining runs, you're going to lose points. The more points that you have, the higher chance that you will get more revenue, such as these unassigned extra runs that are, sort of what we call wild runs. Your points is your currency in the line haul system. So the more runs you can accept and that you can fill, and that's why recruiting is so important. Having a driver behind the wheel for every run that you're responsible for on the dedicated side. And then if there's anything that's unassigned, if you can give FedEx some extra help on those unassigns, you're going to accumulate those points even faster. So that's what we mean by the point system. It's essentially it's your not your credit score so much, but it's the currency you use to get more runs and build your revenue even more. Next one. So Sunny Ali says Pictionary. The multiple has been dropping for a few months, but Rock and Soul multiple is still higher than industry average. Why is that the case?
Yeah, this is a kind of a complicated, not complicated question. I would say one of the things that we do really well at Route Consultant is, and it's largely because of our industry experiences, is we are good at representing projections with very honest and I would say conservative margins. So in most cases, if you look at the listings that we have, the margins are going to look lower than some of our competitors. I would argue that they're just more accurate. So I would say we've got lower margins. So it makes the multiples look higher because our margins are represented lower, when in reality, the prices are kind of the same. So if you looked at someone, if we had a business listed at a 20% margin, another broker may have that same business kind of artificially represented at like a 30 or 35% margin, which is really physically unattainable. And so when you price those, our multiples are going to be higher, but the margin on that business really isn't 30%, it's 20%. So I would say, and I don't think it's necessarily intentional misrepresentation. I think it's sometimes just a lack of industry knowledge. A lot of other people include peak and things like that in their projections as well. So we don't do any of that. We don't include any extra allocation for peak season or any extra growth that could happen over the 12 months. So I would say we have, really conservative projections that make those multiples look higher.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about Rock Consultant is that we have, because of the volume, the number of listings we have processed in the years that we've been in existence. I mean, there's very, very few things and very, very few kinds of variables that we do not factor into our listing prices, right? So we take into account all the things that really matter from our experience in the space and from our experience in the brokerage. I mean, there are so many things we do and the things we take into account that you may not see on other sites. So yeah, if it looks conservative, that's probably because it is, or if it looks high, there's a reason why it is. Get into those details with us so we can kind of explain. That's one thing we love to do here is educate on why the numbers we have are the way they are.
Yes.
Okay, Marty asked how to use EBITDA as a percentage. I think you kind of already talked about that. Mm-hmm. Another anonymous who votes for Monopoly. If priced at the lower side of the route consultant provided valuation, for example, priced aggressively, what is the average time to sell for a $1 to $1.5 million business?
That's a great question. I would say minimum, just with the FedEx process, 3 months is going to be kind of your minimum timeline. 3 to 6 months is going to be our kind of average timeline. And if you're really holding out for maximum price, it can be a little bit more than that, but 3 to 6 months is going to be your average.
Yeah, and you want to talk a little bit, Lee, about does the pricing, whether it's aggressive or more moderate, does that have anything to do with that overall timeline? I mean, there's a lot of other factors, obviously, that go into it. FedEx has to approve it, and what are some other things that might slow it down? Even if, like, yes, buyer and seller are like, yes, let's get this done. What could potentially slow up the process?
Yeah, FedEx for sure. Kind of like you mentioned, the FedEx process. We have. At Route Consultant, we are very familiar with the process, but it's very heavily terminal dependent and how familiar the terminal is with the process as well. If they're a terminal that does sales a lot, it can go really quickly. If they're a terminal that does not do sales a lot, it can go quite slow. And then financing, of course, is another factor there, is if the buyer is using a bank, particularly the SBA, that can slow down the process as well.
And the question here from another anonymous, exactly like we talked about at the beginning, why are there so many routes for sale? Is it because the businesses for sale are not SBA eligible and buyers can't find lenders who will allow for a lower down payment purchase price? Is that something we're seeing?
I would not necessarily count that as a reason why there are so many businesses for sale. I would say definitely less businesses are SBA eligible now than before, and that can contribute to it takes a little bit longer to find buyers because the buyer pool is a little bit smaller if you can't use the SBA in some cases. But I would not necessarily say that it's the reason why lots of businesses are on the market. But it is a reason why some may be taking a little bit longer to sell.
Yeah. Yvette Werman says, Clue, that's another vote for Clue here. We have a larger CSA and have met scale at, please make sure this is not a typo, Yvette, 66% of the terminal. A full 2/3 of the terminal. So part of the area is rural. Do you think it's possible to sell that part of the area within the family, but continue to be managed by us so a higher negotiated price per stop can be attained? Have you ever heard of this strategy?
Interesting. Yeah, if you kind of depends on the terminal, I would say. If you want to keep it managed by family, you would have to start another corporation and have another AO. Some terminals are okay with family members running businesses and some aren't. So I would say it's terminal dependent. But I would say that is definitely a strategy to get your contract rates higher. Yes.
Yeah. And one thing I've seen, Lee, I don't know if you've noticed this or not. the way I heard it described to me is, again, it is going to vary by terminal, right? But one thing that some terminals tell us is that they don't want two business owners that have the same risk profile being separate owners in the same building, because essentially you've got the same potential liabilities. If there's a, if you fail to get capital from new trucks, you can't grow, and you have a bunch of service failures or whatever it is, they don't want two people like husband and wife, for example. They're a little bit hesitant to do that because you have the same personal risk profile, the same personal financials, which is going to make it a little bit different if they, it's a challenge if you want to try to manage it that way. I have seen it done that way. I've seen people that get allowed to go way over scale because they're running a family or a close friend or something like that, where it's clear that it's one company really, but it's just under two corporations. But yeah, again, like you said, Leah, it really just depends on the terminal. Every senior manager is going to have a different level of different appetite for that kind of thing. So just check and see what market you're in, see if that's something that they'll allow. Okay, and then Raj Shah, the last question. So if you guys have more questions, go ahead and get them in. Again, even if it's not having to do with listings and evaluations, if it's anything FedEx Ground related, ask the question. So board game for him is Rubik's Cube. In your experience, are there banks out there who could lend a business loan for a line haul business?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. Banks can do line haul. Seen it done quite a few times. Just like P&D, similar process, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Are there any, do you see any more roadblocks in the line haul or P&D side? You want to maybe talk about the differences between the two? Is there any difference?
Not really. Not that I can think of. I would say kind of the lease truck strategy. Like I said, I kind of said it earlier, where there are generally more lease businesses with lease trucks in line haul than with P&D. And so if a business has the lease trucks, there's of course no assets really associated with the business, so sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge, but if the cash flow is there, then that's still possible as well.
Gotcha. Okay, got another one from Sunny. What are the rates that you're seeing in the market for line haul financing from private as well as SBA 7A?
Yeah, so SBA 7A is prime, normally plus 2.75% for most lenders, which I think right now is putting us at about 10.5%, maybe 10.75% is what it is right now. I haven't checked prime in the last couple of days, but it's right around that range, around 10.5% for SBA. As far as private lending goes, I'm not really sure what you mean by that, but generally any type of conventional lending or like equity,
I think that's what they mean.
financing. Or like even seller financing are going to have somewhat lower interest rates in that. So I would say probably closer to that 7, 8, 9 range.
Okay, so that's all the questions we've got. I've got one more I do want to ask you, Leah, and this is something that I've seen this question several times, and it's something I know that a lot of people are wondering about, especially now that there are more metrics. The metals system that just kind of got rolled out, there's different tiers of that makes contractors wonder, can I sell? Should I sell if I'm in a lower metal category? So let's say you get an OTC like you were talking about earlier. Does the buyer inherit that OTC if they buy a part of the business? So maybe the existing owner is still there, but if the buyer buys, do they get that OTC as well?
They do not. No, as long as it's an asset sale, which in most cases FedEx is, it's a completely new corporation, that does not go over to the new owner.
Yeah, perfect. All right, everyone, going once, going twice. All right, we're going to shut it down. So thank you all for being here. Leah, thank you again for being here. We're going to see you guys next week. Go sign up for the expo if you haven't done that yet. We'll see you back here same time next week.
Awesome. Thank you.